democratization from outside, ? And it's about the challenges for civil society and political opposition working from outside the country. As we have heard in the previous panels, unfortunately, many active citizens have been forced to leave their countries, and of course, working from another country is a completely different situation. It's a challenge, but of course, it could also be seen as there are some new possibilities. Franak, can you hear us? Not yet.
I hear you very well.
Great. Good afternoon. So I will start with giving the word to Natalia Tsikhanouskajas, who from Jasna. And I would just like you first to just give your reflections on the topic. How is it to work from exile, and why did you end up in this situation?
Yeah, thank you. Nice to see you again, a lot of you, and welcome to new people who joined. As we discussed previously, some members of Human Rights Center now left Belarus, about 50 people for today, and I think the biggest part of them are faced criminal persecution because of their human rights work. But till now we have about 20 people of staff in Belarus who continue their work, and a lot of volunteers, of course, as I mentioned. And 7 of my colleagues are in pretrial detention centers under criminal persecution. I have to repeat it because it's very important for us. But I'd like to tell about that it's not the first time when Belarusian NGOs and human rights organizations have to work from abroad. We have to speak, for example, about Belarusian Human Rights House. It was founded, registered more than 10 years ago in Vilnius. It's the only human rights house in the world that works in exile. And a lot of human rights meetings, human rights courses, seminars, and so on were done abroad because of questions of security of the participants. And for example, human rights summer schools that took place more than 12 years, I think, they also were conducted in Ukraine, in Vilnius, and so on. So it's not a very new situation for Belarusian NGOs. And of course, there are some challenges in such situation. The access to information in Belarus is more limited, and also people are more afraid to speak about their problems and human rights violations. But we work on this, and that's very interesting that, of course, COVID-19 also taught us how to act in such circumstances, how to move to remote work and so on. And you all can see like this hybrid format of working, for example, of being here online and offline. So it's possible. My great idea that if you want to continue your work, you could do it in any circumstances. And also, I'd like to share that for me personally, it keeps me sometimes angry when people say that those who are abroad from Belarus, that they don't have this connection. I left Belarus in January, and it's pretty clear for me that if I return, I would be arrested. But I continue to with Belarusian youth. I work with Belarusian people. Now we work on Belarusian time because it's different from Vilnius, for example. I speak Belarusian language, so like I live in Belarus, but like very remote. And that keeps me optimistic because I see that a lot of my colleagues also continue to this, and most of us are really waiting for the time that we can return to Belarus, but not only waiting, but doing our best to do this. Maybe if we speak for, come back to some details, Of course, we use internet for collecting and spreading information. We always are looking for new forms of work with people, with victims of human rights violations, in order to collect information and to present it. And also, thanks to new technologies, it's possible also to provide help for people also anonymously. For example, our lawyers, they work anonymously. It's also a kind of challenge because usually it was very personalized. For example, our lawyer, Valentin Stefanovich, who is now in prison, he was very famous and well known personally. But for today, it's impossible for our, for example, young lawyers. But we collect this information and we know who works, who helps us, and that I really hope this would be presented in some years in Belarus, and also names of our brave volunteers who did this history of human rights now in Belarus. So one of our goals is also to collect this information and to save it for future, for example. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really like that picture you put in my head of I live in Belarus but remotely, just like we all, that's like many other things during the pandemic. I'm going to consider that Franak is seated between the two of you. So that's like my imagination of this panel. So now I would like to give the word to Franak, who is also from Belarus, but he is not representing civil society. Well, he is representing civil society. In my perspective, political opposition is also civil society, but you are more political, so to say. So please, where are you and what are you doing from exile?
Good afternoon, and thanks so much for having this discussion. I'm in Vilnius right now, and I work with Svetlana Tsikhanouskaja, and pleased to be in such a distinguished group of people. I started, I'm a bit civil society, a bit journalist, and now a bit in politics. But this is, I think, very usual thing, unfortunately, for Belarus, because all of us are united by our wish to change the situation in the country, bring democracy and dismantle dictatorship. So we even see sometimes the journalists, for example, are more persecuted and repressed than activists or politicians. So we are trying right now to mobilize international solidarity, mobilize international community to help Belarus, not only in terms of political pressure, but also in terms of assistance. We see the new civil society that was formed last year. There are traditional institutions such as trade unions or traditional media outlets, traditional NGOs, but also there are emerging ones, striking committees, Telegram channels, funds of solidarity, like fund of sports solidarity, cultural solidarity, absolute phenomena. Group of athletes who stood up against Lukashenko, finally united and created the Telegram group and then organization, and now they're like the front liners of the fight for freedom and democracy. And the same about political groups. There are traditional political parties which are very limited, and there are new initiatives, new influencers, new political figures that are appear in emerging. And what we are trying to do right now to unite, to coordinate, to marry these two layers of civil society, because both of these layers are very important. You cannot just say that we need trade unions and we don't need striking committees, because we need both. And sometimes it's difficult because they have different approaches, experiences, even styles of work. So sometimes it's very difficult for our office, to gather together groups with different background, different story. The biggest challenge right now is to make sure people on the ground receive assistance. There is the misunderstanding that Lukashenko destroyed everything, no more organizations on the ground, everything is in exile. And very often decision makers use it as the argument, okay, so perhaps they don't need more assistance since everything is destroyed. and it's not true. It's misleading. Opposite, people need support as never before. And majority of activists, people, volunteers, they are on the ground. They fight, but they are risking much more than before, and they hide, and they do much more carefully what they did before. The public figures, the heads, are in exile abroad, but they are in touch on a daily basis with those on the ground. And thanks to Zoom, and thanks to Skype, thanks to somehow this pandemic era, people learn to communicate on distance. Even if they are on different sides of the border, they're still in touch. And I don't feel like we have the gap between those who fled into Kiev, Warsaw, or Vilnius, and those who remain. We have so many calls and discussions with them, so I think we did not lose this connection, thanks God. About assistance, it must be flexible. That's the biggest problem right now. The only way to pass assistance or funds to Belarus is through digital currencies. Unfortunately, many organizations and funds, institutions don't work with digital currency. If you tell them Bitcoin, oh, Bitcoin, the dark web, deep web, horrible. But in case like Belarus, that's the only way to support people and to make sure they're not abandoned. Or the same thing about planning. Of course, international organizations, they like planning 5 years in advance, 2 years in advance. This long-term planning. Give us strategy for 2 years. Gosh, I can't give you the plan for next 2 months, because situation 1 month ago and right now is totally different. Everything is changing so quickly. We had organization, Belarusian Popular Front last week. There is no more Belarusian Popular Front this week. Lukashenko was trying to conduct a referendum on constitution change 2 weeks ago, but now migration escalation happened. No more discussion on constitutional referendum. So we should be so flexible, and Belarusians must be are who the most aware. They must be able, to preserve this elasticity and flexibility to decide what's more important, what not. Human rights defenders are on the front line, and they are the most sensitive. They are vulnerable, and I think they are the basis for all other activities. If human rights defenders will not be supported enough, all other activities will not have sense, because then people who rely on human rights defenders, they will not be confident that they will receive support or aid or solidarity. So you see, all these layers are so interconnected, and you can't just say that we should prioritize media and less focus on other types of organization. No, all of them are important, and the scale of needs has increased significantly. But on the other hand, on the positive side, we are witnessing how the civil society is getting mature, resistant, resilient, and in the end, we will get immunity to dictatorship. When Lukashenko falls down, it can happen at any moment. We will have quite developed organizations with experience. It's like crash course for many new activists who just joined the campaign last year. And when a system regime falls down, we will have vibrant civil society, which will come back from exile quickly, restore operation in Belarus. And when elections happen, we will have already people on the ground, brave, creative, full of energy to work. Yes, I can stop here.
So on one hand, you try to fit it, you really need just to the work you are doing as an organization inside. You need to continue try doing that from the outside and supporting the colleagues you have still in the country. On the other hand, and that is of course harder when you're not there. On the other hand, what you can do from the outside, something that is harder inside, is raising support, international support. And I guess a challenge would be something that you mentioned as well, that this, and also you, that there might be this rift between the inside and the outside, that there are accusations that you don't understand our situation, you don't understand our situation, and so on. And I guess that's one of the challenges, and it would be interesting to hear what your thoughts are about seeing to that not happen. Of course, having a lot of contact with the people inside and so on, but in the long run, it's something that often happens, that there's a rift between the exile opposition and the opposition within the country. So that would be interesting to hear what you had to say about your thoughts about how to stop that kind of development. Thank you, Franak. Now I will give the word to Anna, who is from a new country, not Belarus, from Russia, and your reflections about working for democracy in Russia, but from the outside.
Thank you very much. I think my reflections are coming from a very specific point. It's building infrastructure and it's building communities that are, making this international solidarity happen. Because for many years already, I lead the EU-Russia Civil Society Forum. I'm executive director of an international association. In Germany. The forum started 10 years ago. It was actually a beautiful moment when it was clear that the schemes that would be available for the Eastern Partnership countries probably will not happen for Russia. And this is exactly when a bunch of people from the civil society on both sides, European NGOs and Russian NGOs, said, okay, well, we will just start our own thing that will be keeping us together. And that's our story of those 10 years. So it's a German Verein, it's a German association that is doing international cooperation. We have 192 member organizations, quite big. And as you can imagine, this membership's been changing over years. And we do have the groups of organizations or people that used to be very active in Russia and then resurfaced somewhere else, and they're doing activism. So my speech is exactly about the need for infrastructure for international solidarity and how we can be all building it together. The very important, a few points I think I want to share. Of course, everything is very important to me. Let's see how important these will be to you. Yes, I am always also sharing this presumption that the support should go where the action is happening, and I would say at this point it means it's mostly happening on the ground in Russia. So we need to be looking into ways of supporting local initiatives, organizations, people that are there, that are standing up for their rights and values, and not just there, but who are collectively our rights and values. Because I'm of the opinion that if one is chained, none of us is free. So that's pretty much where I would say I'm coming from. So definitely more support, more solidarity needs to be going towards organizations active in Russia and fighting their fight, and active in all other places and spaces. My second point, yes, of course, where the action is happening, sometimes it's happening elsewhere, and you can be still very actively engaging on a country, especially if we're talking international advocacy. That definitely is more efficiently done from the outside than inside in some cases. So here I would be calling on the European partners to be assuming those roles and maybe helping in terms of organizing international advocacy, obviously cooperating with people that have this unique knowledge for a country. My number 3 would be, of course, connecting different crises. Again, they're all connected. I'm so happy that we're sitting here with Natalia. And yesterday we were also with the Ukrainian colleagues. And it's actually a much wider situation. We're in the midst of our own crisis. I'm thinking hard about the memorial, and my heart goes out for Belarus. And I'm remembering an online panel with Aleksej Navalnyjs in November previous year, and and I remember campaigning for Aleksej Navalnyjs, the previous time he was in prison, 10 years ago, and I still have T-shirts from that time. Also gives me hope and shows that this, the engagement on each other causes is very, very important. And we just, and we also have Afghanistan unfolding. So I know that you need to have a very big heart and very good planning to engage in all these things. But I really think that, an important component of succeeding here is really also working on other causes and having this interconnection in between different causes. Otherwise, we're all kind of boxed and it's harder to promote a joint cause. I spoke a lot about solidarity and I will speak more about it. One thing that I definitely need to, maybe two things more, but the last two things. One is the whole rhetoric of, people in exile, people not in exile, which I hear a lot lately, and I don't necessarily find it very helpful because, again, it's just putting you into a certain box. And from watching people that left their country because of activism, and, before one crisis erupted, there was a previous crisis, and we've seen Azerbaijan, and we've seen Turkmenistan, and other places. I think it's very important to have a longer term perspective and understand that people also change over time. They left the place where they were activists, or where they were persecuted because of what they did. Sometimes it's academic studies, sometimes it's art. It's not just always about human rights, it's about everything, or it can be everything. So they left, and then it just replaces everything they used to be doing and they used to have. I think when designing those actions of solidarity and support, we need to keep in mind that people might be changing and also stepping on a different track. They might stop being freedom fighters, and this is also normal, and we should be thinking how to integrate them and give them a different life. They can be also productive in their new societies. They don't have to be living in that past that they left. It's it's a very deeply held belief that I'm sharing. You don't have to agree with it at all. I'm just saying that sometimes we need to be just mindful with simply coining people as these are political exiles and that's all they do. No, they can do so much more, and we can be doing so much more together. So just that this word is not separating separating society into us and them, which sometimes I see. So that was the one before the last, and the last one is the importance of, again, exchanges, and that's something also we've seen during the pandemic. The forum was really trying to build up solidarity programming, and of course it's a lot of public actions, we're standing up for our organizations and their causes, be it in Eastern Europe. Unfortunately we do have causes from all over the place. There's Poland, there's Hungary, and we should be able to engage on these. And we know that sometimes people need a break from their fight. They just need rest and respite and something else than fighting. And in that sense, fellowships is something that we think definitely needs to happen more and more often. This is when we are hosting a person or a family. Some schemes will only host one person, but you do have a family and maybe you want to travel together. So you host people for some time, just giving them, an option of being in a different space, in a different mental space as well. And using this time to restore and rejuvenate, using this time sometimes to build new skills, to network, just to be in a different space. I think it's very, very important component and element, and that's something that we should be also building up in our organizations as we can. I'm finishing right now. It's also the forum's experience. We had a program for the Russian.
I'm sorry, I'll give the word back to you. I just want to say Franak is leaving. I think he's raising up and going. So I just want to say about the Belarusian opposition that they have really, when it comes to working from exile, something that they have really used this lobbying for the cause, and they have done that extremely effectively. And that is, and what you mentioned, one of the positive sides of being in exile is, of course, that you can meet important people in other countries and just meet as many people as possible so that they have a personal relationship to your cause. And that is something that you have, and I guess that's what you're running to now, an important meeting for raising awareness. That's my guess. So thank you so much for participating.
Thank you so much. I have to run. I'm so sorry. We just like a very, very crazy day, week, time, life in general.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, thank you and good luck and thanks for your help.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for participation. Bye-bye. Please finish your sentence. I just didn't want to.
Yes, that's a good opportunity to finish my sentence. Yeah, an end of sentence. But that'd be end of sentence for all the political prisoners. I think that's something I need to, just a pun on the sentence word. Yes, I was speaking about the importance of fellowships and support to activists through hosting them to, again, our organizations, our cities. And I would finish at one of the projects that we're working on now in Berlin with the Berlin municipality. We call it Berlin Sheltered City. We were very inspired by this scheme that originated in the Netherlands, Sheltered Cities. And I do believe that it's very, I mean, it's also up to the cities. It's not just about the states, but local communities. Yes, to take on, such fellows and fellowships and, again, celebrate people working on important causes in their countries. And that's what we're trying to build up with Berlin. And of course, we are at the very beginning of this project, but we really hope that there will be more cities joining in on the way of constructive engagement and creating those safe spaces for people that had to leave for a short time or a longer time. But it's important that we have those safe spaces to talk to each other, connect, support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will soon give the word to Anastasia Sergeyeva from Russia, Free Russia Foundation. I just want to, from what you've said and what Franak said, when we're talking about challenges, we're actually talking about like two groups of challenges. We're talking about the challenges to the organization, to the cause, and then the challenges, of course, to the individuals, to the people. Like, because you said in the beginning, I live remotely in Belarus, but you can't live like that for your whole life. You have to create some kind of other, I mean, of course, you hope that you will be going back to Russia to Belarus next year, and you hope to go back to Russia sometime, I guess, or you have made your own reality where you live now.
My reality looks extremely privileged, especially during the pandemic. I can move in all directions, and by all means, people don't need to be in exile to be working in international organizations. So that's my own reality. We're free to move, and me and my team, we go regularly to Russia and work with our 100 member organizations in Russia and organize events. And just recently we had a conference for 80 people. It's very hard to bring people across borders now, so we had to go to Serbia for the European counterparts and the Russian counterparts to meet. But it was possible. So I guess that's exactly, again, the way we approach the situation. it's important to have the infrastructure to look for opportunities to make things possible. Again, there are a lot of people in a situation when they cannot cross the borders, and that's exactly the ones we are standing up for.
Thank you so much. So I want to say welcome to Anastasia Sergeyeva from the organization Free Russia Foundation. And you are where right now?
Just one remark, not Free Russia Foundation, it's another organization. We have Association for Free Russia, Zavolno-Rossia, which is the Polish entity registered in Poland.
I'm sorry, I was wrong informed. Please tell me about what you work with and where you are. Where are you?
Yeah, I left Russia during the previous wave of immigration, and I'm based in Poland, in Warsaw. So we have our Association for Free Russia there. And also we are operating with projects about Russia, on Russia, in Russia for last 6 years. And our team work from abroad. Also, our focus from the very beginning was for developing and building up Russian diaspora, democracy diaspora in the European states. And this year we have special focus on this because in January, the first time ever we saw a really great activity of Russians living abroad. Almost all European states showed they have pro-democracy Russian communities, and people massively came out to support Navalny and people in Russia, activists in Russia who protested. So now it's not, this activity is not stopped. It's maybe more about online things, less about some rallies. But by now we have more and more local groups in different countries which are trying to coordinate to each other and try to build their own agenda in their countries for Russian community, for local community, to build their networking with local political actors, journalists, experts, those people who are interested in Russian affairs in these countries. And I believe this is a new chapter for Russians abroad, which is really promising for us, because we didn't have any such activity either in recent years or in Soviet times. And this was a great difference between, for example, Russian community in outside Russia, outside Soviet Union, and Ukrainian or Baltic states, nations, communities, or Georgian, and so on. So this is what I believe should be paid attention to, because it's besides it is some kind of image of Russians and the example for Russian society about those people from Russia who live in Europe and have some special pro-democracy views and tell about them. It also a great and important bridge between European civil society and Russian society, because all these people, they still have their connections, and no one could cut them of these connections. Nobody, and neither Putin nor his technique staff, nor Lukashenko or something else could cut people off their connections with their relatives, friends, classmates, university mates, friends, and so on. Even they try to do this, cutting, for example, opposition or civil society resources from the internet inside Russia, they will not be able turn off all people-to-people contacts and activities. So this is other very important thing which should be remembered and should be mentioned always.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I think that final point, because in the beginning, in this morning, we were talking about how civil society, how the people are starting to donate money, how the civil activity in the Russian society has grown. And it's interesting that we can see the same process in the people in Russia and Belarus and the people outside the countries. I mean, for instance, the elections in Belarus, the lines to vote in Moscow, we didn't see that in previous elections as far as I know. And it really seems that before, very often in Western Europe, we had this idea that the strange Russians, they come to Western Europe and then they support Putin. But now we can see that's actually not true, and people are getting active. It really shows that it's one people. The same process of activization, mobilization is going on both inside and outside the country. I find that very interesting. Why do you think that is? That is actually my question to Natalia. When it comes to Belarus, why did this happen both in Belarus and outside Belarus at the same time? This activization of people.
It's a really very interesting question of Belarusian diaspora in different countries, and I think the first time when it was raised widely was 2017, when dozens of people were arrested on peaceful rally because of anniversary of Belarusian People's Republic, and so a lot of people were arrested and fined also, and it was launched a campaign called Buy Help for donations for those who were fined, and people collected a great amount of money for their time and for their situation, and it was a very big role of Belarusian diaspora in different countries. And in 2020, they redid this campaign, firstly in the summer when first people were arrested and fined because of supporting Babarika, for example, when he was arrested in June 2020. But then when people saw after the elections day how people were beaten in the streets of Minsk and other cities in Belarus, and that a lot of people were injured by grenades, rubber bullets, water cannons, and so on. So people started to donate money to those who are like victims of such injuries. And I'm not sure if you know that the first amount for the first week was about $3 billion collected for people. 3 millions, yeah. Millions, 3 million, sorry. 3 millions of dollars. And also that was a kind of support. Like, for example, I didn't receive like any dollar of this, but when I checked every day on the website, on their Facebook page, how much did they collect, that was a kind of support, because I felt this solidarity, how it looks and how it works. And also that was a great campaign about workers who striked. It was called like I Work for You. So people donated money for those who will strike, and so they wouldn't have salary. And I was this autumn in Germany, and the first meeting of Belarusian diaspora there, and also they told like we're living here, for example, for 10 years, but it didn't know any Belarusian before these elections in 2020. Like, people discovered themselves being active, their neighbors and other people from Belarus being active. And for me, it looks like developing extremely fast development of civil society. In some countries you can check this way for like dozens of years, but in Belarus it was like boom, very fast, and that's really interesting, as it should be kind of scientific psychological research on this.
It's a bit like
But coming back to your question, why? I really think that the nature of human is to be active and also to communicate with people and to help people. So you can't stop it. You can try, like in Russia and Belarus, but you can't stop it. So it's very natural for people.
Mm-hmm. I think when I prepared for this, I was thinking, okay, so we will have people who are forced in exile, and they will tell me how hard it is to work from exile. But instead, now we're talking about all the things that is possible to do, which is very nice. So, but you were not forced. You were forced in exile, but you have chosen to work from abroad, both of you.
To work for the American NGO in Russia, and it had to be closed its Moscow office in 2012. So the next consequence of this was that I moved together with the organization to Poland, and after quitting it, I had a choice to come back to Russia and try to be some vegetable person without any professional activities, or to continue working from abroad. So I chose the second, and by now I have no possibility to come back to Russia. I do not have Russian passport by now. I have a travel document, Geneva travel document, and this also make me more difficult to, for example, to be a part of events in some neutral countries like Serbia, for example, where our organization is a member of EU-Russia Civil Society Forum, but I can't came there because of my documents, for example. So I have my limitations because of the political situation.
Natalia, you have been forced into exile, and you've been in exile for a year?
From January 2021.
And you have been in exile for almost 10 years. So what would your advice be to Natalia for her organization and for her personally? But let's hope she won't be in exile for 10 years.
Yeah, actually, I believe the main point and the first point which you have to struggle to is frustration and some psychological crisis when you have to find out how and what can you do from outside, from abroad, because it's not often easy for a lot of people. We work with activists, journalists, experts who had to leave recently, and we are assisting them in initial integration. And I can say that almost everyone, each of them has first issues with how can I work from outside. For journalists, it's how can we now touch the media? Yeah, how can we be with our to write about the situation in the country if we are outside the country? For activists, okay, we have internet, but how could we coordinate everything in the field? For experts, even more, because who we are interested here, for whom we are interested here as experts, as political specialists or publicists and so on. So in fact, the first point is to find your effective place and effective opportunity. How can you work further? And then you you can sustain the situation. You can work effectively if you find it. The only point, of course, that some kind of psychological frustration is coming back because, it's very difficult to work in the sphere without having any results of your work, of your job. So it's the same inside Russia and outside Russia. But outside Russia, you are not in touch with people so much. So it's sometimes really difficult just to find out whether your actions, your work is effective or not. And you have to be prepared for some long-term things more than to short-term win. Because, for example, for me and for my colleagues, first it was some kind of idea that, okay, we are now leaving the country, but we will be back in a couple of years. And because it's impossible to be some kind of long-term of closeness of everything, of course something will change and it would be more opportunities and so on. And then it was the year 2014 with all Ukrainian events and situation, and it became obvious that not we could come back now, but even we have to be prepared to more tough situation. And it was really difficult for me to overcome and to find out how to work further, what to do and what to concentrate on. Only having some long-term strategy ideas and working step by step on them, we can survive and we can feel some kind of effectiveness, because in this case we could see a very small but certain steps which we done, and we can and it's very supportive when you are doing something.
So thank you. I have no more questions to you. I just have some extra questions, but I thought maybe there are somebody from the audience who would like to pose any questions. Yes. We will give you a microphone. Just a minute.
Thank you. Even if we have been told that we shall not compare Russia to Belarus, it's impossible not to do it because we are mixed together here in the conference. But I can't stop thinking. I know a lot of Belarusians have left, particularly to Poland, Ukraine, and Lithuania. Yes. Because of the situation, I can understand it very well. But with Russia, it's awful. It's also an awful situation. But there are not so many who have left this time. We have not heard about many people leaving Russia because of the repression. Why not?
Obviously, the situations, they're put together, and the two countries are next to one another and even part of some political construction. But the situation is different, and if we're speaking about how the repression mechanism works, I guess it's still at this, it is at the selective mode in Russia. And it is in the mass mode in Belarus. I'm sorry, Natasha, if I'm saying something that doesn't encapsulate, doesn't reflect your reality. I'm just, I guess, sharing the way I see it. I see it also the difference, reflecting on what was said, and how I explain it to myself. I think it was a great moment in the birth of Belarus and Belarusian people as a civic nation in 2020 in August, and that's absolutely admirable and incredible when you really you saw it, and really popular support to the ideas and really peaceful people peacefully standing up for these ideas. So I think it's really, it needs to be studied, definitely, how it was just the tipping point, and I was seeing that, a great new star was born as a civic nation. I wouldn't say the same thing about Russia. Sadly, maybe, but I just know very different Russias, very different realities, the big cities, the smaller places, the Caucasus. It is also a big place, so it's hard to create one reality. If there's one reality, it's probably totalitarian, not good. So in that sense, also the situation is different, and I obviously they're very free, liberally minded people, but also there are people that are supporting the government, and that also goes for people living abroad that originate from somewhere. I mean, they're not liberally minded, and they're not getting liberally minded when they cross this border. They can be very conservative in their views. So there are a bunch of phenomena. So I just, I see that the situation in Russia is about really the selective persecution. And that's why people are rather still in the individual mode of making decision what they do. Plus, I mean, if it's compared to, say, the waves of immigration that the Soviet Union saw, or what was happening right after the breakdown of the Soviet Union, I mean, it's a very different time. So people used to be leaving, and that was forever. So if somebody immigrated, that was forever, and there are huge countries that are created through immigration, or huge communities. It's an incredible wealth of movement of the human capital. So in that sense, I believe that we should also understand that there is a big community that was definitely making their choices to be somewhere else, and they had the luxury of making that choice, working somewhere, going somewhere, living somewhere. And some of the, again, the Russian communities that might be seen, that's exactly what they're doing. They have businesses, for instance. They might be also active in the social or even political front, but it's just the modern world, and it allows much less of a being rooted in one place and one culture. So that's why I think it's complex, but of course the mass migration or exodus, you name it, might happen obviously when there is a change of the regime. Oppression, repression is elevated to a mass scale. So that's my explanation. So it's a little wordy, but this is how I see it. Still, I would, we described in the first panel why people might be looking at making other choices. Sometimes, by the way, the choice is leaving activism, staying where you are. So there's really multiplicity of choices. So there might be people popping up, showing up, I guess, wherever they are, whoever they are. I mean, Russia has also the situation with its own migrants, people coming into Russia. Wherever we are, it's good if we think in terms of integration for all the newcomers. Thank you.
And you said something in the morning that I would like to repeat in context, so that we have to remember that the borders is something that they made up. We shall feel that the borders are not real to us. It's made up by the bad guys. So Anastasia, please.
Yeah, I just want to add to Anna that first of all, we have a big immigration trend in Russia now. It's just not very specifically political. It's more about values, because more and more people are strategically looking for some better place for living for them and or for their children. We see even if parents can't live together with children, we try to send their children to the university somewhere. And the only point that the political immigration, the immigration with direct political reasons, is really limited. And I can see that even opposite situation, that people who are doing some activist work in Russia, they even don't think about the immigration. And even when the threats are coming, sometimes it's very difficult for them to decide to leave, because they are opposite to people who are ready to leave and who are preparing for immigration and could do it or faster or slower, but really doing this in practice. These people are really unprepared. And when it is a real case when, for example, I'm telling to a person, you have to leave it immediately because you could be arrested, you could be detained every day. And he answering me, oh, but I have my cats, I have my dog, what can I do with these? I can't leave because I have my pets, or I have my parents and I can't live without my parents, and I can't take them, and so on. Or even the weirdest answer I had, that, I've just finished repairing in my kitchen. How can I live now? So this is a point that there are different parts of Russian society, and those who are going and who think about immigration, they do it, but they do not concentrate in Vilnius, for example, or in some other in Poland and Warsaw, but they are doing all their best for economic immigration. And those who are political immigrants, they are really not massive, and that's why we do not see them in such numbers like Belarus activists now.
Yeah, I think what you said shows that, leaving your country is such a big decision. It's a really, really big decision. And therefore the situation has to be acute. You have to feel that they are chasing me now. And that's what happened in Belarus. People felt, I have to run away now. But if it's the repression is slowly growing on you, then, I have my cats here. I just renovated my kitchen. This is my country. I live here. So, yeah, I guess it's the acuteness also of what happened in Belarus, So, more questions?
I'd be curious to hear from all our panelists about the idea of a diaspora. You have a country like Armenia, which has a very strong historical diaspora all over the world. I was wondering, I have always been surprised that there was so little seen from the Russian diaspora, which left in after 1917. And there are also other cases, interesting cases like Palestine, where a nation was formed in the diaspora. The Palestinians as such did not identify themselves as a nation until they became in exile. So obviously things can take different courses, and I was wondering if you have ever thought about this. Do you as Russians integrate with historical emigres? In the case of Belarus, can you find any support in people who now define themselves as Belarusians, maybe left as Soviet citizens, but now define themselves as Belarusians? Thank you.
So please, let's take you then, Natalia, Anastasia, and Anna.
Thank you for the question. It's really interesting, but unfortunately, I'm not so qualified in this question. I can share only my opinion, and it's similar to that they say that you can't divide people, and you can't expect from Belarusians, wherever they are, to be different. Yeah, people in Belarus had a long story of repression, of living during Soviet Union, of being similar, quiet, and doing what they're told to do. So it's really like you can't expect to those who left Belarus to be extremely different from that. So it's a very frequent story that people in 2020 found Belarusians in their new cities and so knew that they have neighbors from Belarus and so on. So it's a very natural process, as I see.
Actually, for Russia, the very important thing that the people who left during Soviet time or recent post-Soviet time, first of all, they really struggled for being Europeans, being part of new countries, and they tried to forgot everything they had and to start the life. Or the part of them were continued living in some only Russian-speaking group and community, and then they more or less started participating in programs which embassies offer them, and then they are in fact, now they are the part of the diaspora, which is more pro-Kremlin, pro-Putin, because they have not integrated well into the new country lifestyle, where they didn't learn language well. They have all their propaganda stuff and communities through their communities with embassy programs. And they often very noticeable because they are the only community which which could be found in the country or in the city, specifically if there are more than, I don't know, a couple of dozens Russians living in this specific city. So then the most part of the West integrated Russians, they even tried to escape any Russian, specifically Russian company and specifically Russian communities. And for example, when we started our association and when we discussed with between us, we had to find Russians in Warsaw, for example. We all understood that specifically those of us who left recently, we understood that we tried to escape the places where we could meet these Russians. So for us, it was very specific story of building some alternative Russian community, specifically one which is pro-democracy, which is pro-European, which could not be associated with Russian embassy or Russian cultural center programs, and we succeeded to do it in Warsaw. So by now, people who are coming from Russia or not from Russia, from Belarus, from Ukraine, they very fast understand that who we are and what we are doing, and we are providing some community building, community initiatives. We have community club for families and for children. We're doing some cultural projects, and it's not only about politics, but people know that when they are coming to us, they are not coming to any Kremlin or pro-Kremlin guys, but they are coming to just European Russian community in Warsaw. This is very important, and I believe that for Russian activists in different countries, it is time to build such things, because otherwise they will never change the image that Russians in Europe are supportive to Kremlin, supportive to Putin. What we did this year online with different European communities, we started the project Vote Abroad, and it was dedicated to motivate Russians living abroad to vote and for State Duma elections, which was for us important to show that they can participate in the life of their country. They can participate not only by coming out in the streets in January, but in other activities. And for example, we succeeded in Tomsk. The one single mandate district was specifically won once by smart voting with the votes of people from Great Britain. So the local voting showed the victory of United Russia candidate, but then the votes from Great Britain came, and that votes were completely for opposition, not opposition, but smart vote candidate, which was from LDP RTZ party.
What happened to the people in the embassy did they lose their jobs?
It was interesting because I got the communication about the situation from one high-level British official, and he told that they all, and he is working with Russian situation, so he monitored, and he was really surprised why British community of Russians voted for LDPR party. Then he was explained that LDPR candidate in this district was from smart voting list, but he told me that the most person who was surprised, the mostly surprised person was the ambassador of Russia to Great Britain, who got these results, and he was really completely frustrated and surprised with this. But from other side, we had one bad example, because in Kamchatka, if I'm not mistaken, in Kamchatka, the candidate from smart voting was winning until votes from Latvia came, and Russian votes from Latvia showed the victory of United Russia candidate instead of smart vote. So we have a lot of things to work.
You just see that as one more thing to do. That's a great way to look at it. Yes. Yes, please. And then Anna also to Malcolm's question about the diaspora.
Very quick story about Russian-speaking communities in such countries as Lithuania, Latvia, as it was mentioned. Now I see in Lithuania also like parts of this Russian-speaking community. I mean, in bad sense. Those who, for example, are not going to do vaccination, and those who always criticize the government in order not to improve their work, but just to criticize. And there are such kind of people and actions. But the funny story is that people don't go back to Russia. They continue to live in democratic countries to enjoy all these possibilities of democracy, but just criticize and think that's very, very bad, very bad. But no real action that really shows that it's not their aim.
Mm-hmm. So Anna, what do you think about the diaspora? Why is it organized or not organized the way it is?
Another wonderful field for a little research center, because I think it's our future. I'm sitting and thinking of climate change and how it can produce all sorts of diasporas or people moving around because it's unlivable in the places they come from. So I again, also not being an expert on that at all, but I don't see that the Russian diaspora exists as a phenomenon that you were describing. Maybe because it's big, maybe because it's a big country, and then obviously there are very different cultures also coexisting on that space, which also it has more than 100 nations and languages spoken. So it's really different cultures coexisting. So plus, of course, you have the element of imperial, post-imperial here, I guess, related to Russian language, and that might also be preventing people from getting into any unity. There was never, I guess, such unity. So I don't specifically see that there's a diaspora to speak of. Of course, there are some groupings. There's some places and cities where you hear a lot of language spoken, normally has a very reasonable explanation. But I don't think you can speak of the diaspora as something that is kind of well organized and coordinated. And in terms of the viewpoints, I think it is, people are not immigrating because they want to be in a liberal country. I mean, it's just, pursuit of happiness. So you have the whole spectrum of people coming. And as I said, some of them are very conservative. Plus, I think that is from research that I cannot quote correctly academically, but the first generation tends to be pretty conservative also in their new societies, because they're just trying to follow all the rules. And if I may just to a lady on the comment what Belarus and Russia comparison and the countries that were accepting and accepted a lot of the Belarusian community. I mean, also it's 2020 and it was happening during the COVID year, and somebody needed to open their borders, and these were very few countries and neighbors, and of course they knew the Belarus the Russians very well, and I'm actually extremely grateful to those countries that they made it possible. So clearly still it's a lot of people, and it does change things on the ground. So again, kudos to them that they made it possible, others didn't.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I will give the word to Jon has a question, and there was one more question and Anastasia needs to leave in 5 minutes, so I will first give the word to you, and then Jon. Yes.
I have to go. Yes, thank you for invitation. I believe that you have more interesting time about what is going on, and for me it was specifically important that it is simultaneously about Russia and Belarus, because I believe it's lack of such joint events both topics, and we have seen the situation which is sometimes very close, sometimes very different, but close. And of course it's a point to be more in touch and be more exchanging experience, opinions, situations, and then my point is to have more such events specifically for both countries and about both countries with speakers from both countries. Thank you, and I am glad to hear and to see at least online all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good luck with your important work in Warsaw. I would like to visit your Russian Culture Center in Warsaw. Thank you very much. So now Jon and Judith also wants the word. Yes.
Yeah, just first concerning this difficult choice, leaving or not. So just to remind myself and everyone about the pandemic, because speaking of Belarus, also the choice has been much more difficult, because even if you make the choice of leaving, it's been really, really hard. So I know that people have been forced to take the route to Russia, and considering the cooperation between security services, it's a dangerous field to be in. I have a question following up on this, because it's not only about being outside or inside, because we also have, security organs working abroad. And in the case of Russia, it's well financed. In the case of Belarus, I know that they have actively been trying to get people extradited through international agreements which exist. And it's been, concerning Ukraine, for example, they have been successful in having a group of anarchists extradited, which probably are facing long prison terms in Belarus. And I just imagine that being outside, still in reality and in your own mind, you are still sort of the targets of operations. And I just would like to hear a few words on what you know, Natasha, difficulties you face being abroad, which also sort of hinder you in focusing on your work, talking about freedom of association. I mean, it prolongs also into where you are right now. I mean, you have colleagues in Ukraine, in Georgia, in different places. Maybe you could say a few words on that. And also how, I mean, also when you leave your country, there's this kind of terror going on. I've heard that psychologically, sort of, it can sort of grow the fear of what's happening inside there. Sort of when you are in a more calm environment, can also be enlarged.
Thank you. It's really very interesting questions. And coming back to this very personal stories of migration, that's always very different and very personal. It depends on each situation, family, I don't know, for example, with health, children, and so on. Like so many details in every case. And but the first my first feeling when I came to Vilnius was this feeling of safe, of being in safe, and that's very very valuable for me. Of course, now sometimes my colleagues and I, we don't feel as safe even in Vilnius, because it's, for example, less than 200 kilometers from Vilnius to Minsk, and about 50 from Vilnius to the border of Belarus. And we know exactly that KGB works in Vilnius, of course in Warsaw, of course in Ukraine, and it looks like in general Ukraine is not is a very safe place for Belarusians, because we know about cooperation between Ukrainian enforcement agencies and Belarusians. Also, approximately a month ago, I was in Georgia, and also I faced with a kind of questioning from Georgian agencies, and it also kept me this feeling of unsafe, and we can't trust totally on that. And it always, all these questions of security, of course, we follow special protocols, and we always are revising them and work in consultation with specialists on security. But it's always for the first case, like Roman Protasevich and the Ryanair flight. So we usually don't know when it would happen. I usually think that like I'm not Svetlana Tsikhanouskaja, so it's like clear that the tension, for example, for her is much more, but we don't know the plans and the ideas of the regime also. And I think that now is a good moment to say more about support of such countries, our neighbor countries as Romania, Poland, Ukraine, Latvia also, but also not so neighbor countries, but also friendly like Sweden. We feel this support, and also on personal level, on level of our organization, and also on the level of the whole support of NGOs. And of course, like in terms of security and being safe, for today, Russia, for Belarusians is the same, like to be in Belarus. So it's totally closed for those who can't come back to Belarus. Thank you.
Judith, and that will be the last question.
Thank you. I was interested by something that Anna mentioned when she was speaking at the beginning of the session, and it's related to what we've just been talking about. And that is specifically what we can do. And Anna, you mentioned the concept of shelter cities, safe spaces. and hosting individuals, or preferably whole families, because that's the only thing that actually makes sense for them. I think it's instinctively a very attractive idea that most people would welcome. If you think about it, it's actually far more complex than it might seem. And I was just wondering if you can give examples of what a well-constructed program of that kind, how it might look, because obviously you need to give a certain minimum amount of time to people, otherwise you don't offer the respite that's needed. But then after a certain time, people will start thinking about the need to leave, when they might be starting to put down roots, especially if they're with a family. And the whole idea of what comes next is very, very tricky. So do you think that there are any schemes which actually do work?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Judith. Of course, it's extremely complex and individualized too. And for me, the big question here is a question of capacity. So, because we're working on this project for Berlin, obviously these were the questions, we were immediately asked also by the municipal authorities, what do you guys want? Knowing that it's also the whole world is more or less landing there. The Hong Kong activists, the Turkish activists, not only activists. So we've done quite some research on the level of Berlin for that, but also to create our own, however unscientific model. What components need to be there for the model to work. From the established schemes, so what the Netherlands are doing, and that's pretty much everywhere in in many cities in the Netherlands. This is pretty much a program for very few activists, and people can apply, so it's an open call, and then they get a 1-year-long fellowship, and they're getting a lot of public attention, which I think is also very important for the cause. I mean, it's okay, these individuals are kind of receiving the support that the whole cause deserves, and it's a validation of their work. It's a validation of their campaigns, their organizations. But it's it is we sometimes say boutique scheme. It's very few people. We're not talking about groups of even 10 people coming in every week. So it is selected individuals really. So that's a possibility, a scheme like that, but the city is really engaged, and we have a few scales. We looked at when designing the model how it can be working. So that's one type of a shelter city. There is a different type of a shelter city. So you've seen people speaking from Tbilisi, and there's Tbilisi shelter city that is not connected to the city of Tbilisi at all. It's just based there. And of course it's much less expensive because it's just, the life is less expensive compared to the Netherlands there. And they are receiving many people from also a much wider region now, so quite a few countries, and that's it's a larger operation, The question of capacity is always there. So of course, when devising, this mechanism, you obviously have to be very clear about your goals, whether you're trying to, again, support the cause and the organization through a particular individual, or you're really saving, that particular individual and the family from, again, sometimes it's very, grave threats to their existence or freedom. And that's why this is happening. That's the reasoning behind. And then, of course, the thinking of, staging and the follow-up is very different that goes into it. But there's, in between the two, there are really other ways. What I think I would be advocating for is really a short programs up to 3 months, which is something doable also even with the regular Schengen visas, if we're speaking about the European Union. That would give people, again, these can be artists, it can be writers, it can be academics, a lot of categories might be under pressure and in need of these things, to give them this opportunity to basically think of their next step. But Judith, yes, it is very complex. It involves the border authorities. Somebody has to issue that visa. And be responsible for it. Then, of course, we want to give people the attention and the care they need. And say in Tbilisi, they provide medical assistance, they provide medical help. You can do, quite often that's a problem of human rights defenders. They didn't have time to be thinking about their health. They are helping others, but they have lots of problems. So finally, you can go to a doctor that would speak your language and get your tests and actually figure out what's wrong with you, why you have the death pain. But when I'm trying to imagine the scheme in Germany, I know immediately that 3 months would probably go into just registering that claim and with the healthcare authorities. So it will not work. We will need to look into other ways. So yes, it is a very complex thing. That's why I'm saying that it's really a commitment, but I would really want cities to step in this way, because even through such cases, individual cases, we're showing that, again, we're engaging and we're showing support to the whole cause.
Thank you so much. I know we should have stopped like 4 minutes ago, but I really need to say some last words. I'm so sorry. Because this has been a much broader panel than we actually expected. It hasn't been so much about what you actually do from the exile. We talked about in the beginning that you can raise awareness and you can try to do whatever to support the work that you're supposed to do in the country. And then we've been talking a lot about being a political or having the right not to be political when you are abroad. And I think this is very interesting when it comes to the relationship between the diaspora and the exiled activists. I mean, between the broad diaspora and which is changing, which you talked about. That was very interesting. Also, you pointed. Also, this morning it was mentioned, I think, that this kind of solidarity between exiled activists from those countries and doing joint events. You mentioned having that less T-shirt many years ago, and this kind what you can do in that's another challenge or possibility to develop that kind of work. And also something that I felt very strongly in the beginning, this difference between the personal challenges of being in exile and the organizational challenges of being in exile. Because if you are just your organization, maybe you're not letting yourself being the person you are. And what Franak said in the beginning, that even though there are so many representatives in exile and opposition in exile, we have to remember that the main work is still done inside the country. And also what you said now lately about actually there is a special kind of support needed to people who are in exile, because you don't really feel completely safe here either. So there's still restrictions on your work. You felt free when you came here, but now you still feel a bit restricted by the threats there are to political activists, even when you are in exile. So thank you for this very, very broad talk. And there are lots of ideas of what we can do together and how we can support you. Thank you so much.